Hello! Today we are making soap, and I feel like soap is something that we usually take for granted. And there's actually quite a bit of chemistry that goes behind it. You take two pretty dirty things like oil and sodium hydroxide, or in this case it's labeled as drain cleaner, and turn it into something that washes your hands or your hair or whatever you want to clean.
We'll use a scale, our PPE, which is our gloves and our goggles, and then sodium hydroxide, coconut oil, a hand mixer, a beaker. That's it. First we'll put on our PPE.
Okay, firstly we're going to measure out our coconut oil. You can find many different recipes for soap online. In this instance, we're going to do just simple coconut oil. Usually recipes have many different oils, but there is Castile soap, which is just olive oil, and in this case, it's just coconut oil. So in this recipe, they're calling for 454 grams of coconut oil. So what you need is a scale and some container. We're using a 500 milliliter beaker. And we just weigh out a bunch. I'm gonna go back. In chemistry, you never usually want to put chemicals back in the stock bottle, but this is at home.
There you go, perfect. It's 454.
Okay, sweet. Now we have 454 grams. We're gonna want to melt this. We're using a Mystic Coffee as our hot plate. And while that melts, Aiden's going to tell you about the sodium hydroxide.
Well, sodium hydroxide could be considered a poison. Make sure you read the label on the container itself and make sure you're aware of all of the possible dangers that could occur. For example, this one. It's fatal if it's swallowed or inhaled, and it could cause severe skin burns and serious eye damage. So we have to wear protective gloves, which we're doing, clothing, eye, and face protection. And that's what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So now we will measure 66 grams of sodium hydroxide onto a beaker and scale. Thank you. Now we have 66 grams of sodium hydroxide.
Alright. And then next, we gotta weigh out the water that the sodium hydroxide is gonna go into. We'll set this on the side, make sure that this area is contaminated. We'll make sure that everything's clean afterwards. And then next, we're gonna have where our sodium hydroxide is gonna be dissolved in, which is just 150 grams of distilled water. So lay that out. This might make you want to pee.
Almost there.
Oh, you gotta take off a little bit. This is all about stoichiometry, guys. I'll just do it this way. Do you think that was 4 grams worth?
Yeah,
alright.
51.
So next, I made sure that the water is really cold. Because the reaction between sodium hydroxide and water creates a lot of heat. So you also want to be careful with this because when it creates a lot of heat, it's going to create a bit of sodium hydroxide vapors, which you don't want to breathe in. So make sure you're in a well ventilated room and stay kind of away from it. You want to mix it?
Sure.
Just pour it in.
Oh, in the water? Okay.
Yeah. And then we'll mix it up a little bit too, because sodium hydroxide tends to like to clump onto the bottom of the glass. And you can also tell that the glass is getting quite warm. Very warm, actually. You know, actually, I should probably use a hot plate underneath this glass because it's actually very warm. Want to feel it?
I can confirm that it is warm.
We'll keep stirring this up. And then we're just gonna let this cool down for a while because it's gonna get pretty warm with the oil as well. We don't want it to be too hot. Alright, I tried to make a time lapse, but it was taking too darn long, and then I realized that we have a microwave, so due to the magic of a microwave, our coconut oil is now all liquid. What next is that we gotta mix the two ingredients, the oil and the sodium hydroxide. And we'll do this inside a pot over here. Add the oil. And then next, the sodium hydroxide. And then we carefully mix with a hand mixer. It's very important that you don't have the hand mixer sprayed on you. That would not be good to have a bunch of very, very strong basic material splattered all over you. If that does happen, make sure you go take a shower immediately, a cold one too, for at least 5 minutes. A lovely 5-minute shower in cold water. Okay, we'll start with the lower setting. Make sure that the outlets of this is underneath the surface. And you just stir away. Make sure that there's a nice emulsion, that it's a very continuous mixture. You don't want to have it so that it separates back into oil and sodium hydroxide.
When we go more in depth into this reaction, we will see that the triglyceride, otherwise known as fat or oil, will react with sodium hydroxide to form glycerol and 3 soap molecules. As far as the mechanism for this reaction, there is a nucleophilic attack on the carbonyl by the hydroxide, and then there is a removal of the leaving group, as shown in this picture. Finally, there is a deprotonation of the alcohol by the alkoxide.
Okay.
Alright, so I think that's about as thick as we want it. You don't want to go too thick, otherwise it's going to get really hard to pour in your mold. But you can really see that the texture really starts to change, gets really thick, and that's where you want it, because now we have a nice emulsion. It's not going to separate on us as we're going to let it cure. And soap making usually takes a long time. There's 2 different methods. There's a hot method and there's a cold method. Today we're using the cold method because we're not heating it up. And of course, the hot method, it's hot. You heat it up. And as you might know, if you have a hotter reaction, that means the molecules are going to bump into each other a bit more, and so the reaction rate will go faster. And with a colder temperature, the reaction is going to go slower. So this is going to take about 70 days to complete, and by then we'll have some amazing soap. And you can get really fancy and have some essential oils in there that will give it some scent, but we're just gonna go scentless. Hopefully there might be a coconut smell. We'll see.
This was about 2 or 3 days after we finished making the soap or mixing the ingredients together, and it hardened up very quickly, surprisingly, compared to some other soaps I've made before. Over here we're just cutting it up into pieces, and once that's done, we just let it sit for another 70 days.
So after who knows how many weeks, we finally have soap. We cut them up and they're pretty nice looking. Here, let me get a little closer. Come on. Yeah, see? Soap. Okay. But yeah, so let's try them out and see how they work. Okay. Is that good enough? I don't know. That was really cheesy.
Alright, thanks to us being extremely cheesy throughout this whole entire video, we finally decided to cut out some of the audio, and instead I'm just gonna voice this over. As we can see in this video, we have a really nice soap. It creates a great lather, and look at that. And that's pretty much it. Take care.